Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Newcastle podcast. My name is Michael Grahamson and I will be your host today. And I am joined by two very special guests. First of all, I'm joined by Nick. How's it going, Nick?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. Very good. Obviously,
Good.
A long weekend after Saturday, the Newcastle game, but we're fine. We're rejuvenated and we're actually feeling positive.
But we are feeling positive. I wouldn't say I'm feeling rejuvenated. I feel so tired, guys. So I'm going to need a little bit of pull through today.
Well, just bring the energy for the pod and we'll be fine. But we are also joined by Jo. How's it going, Jo?
I'm good. I'm trying with my energy levels. I'll bring it. I'll bring it for the pod.
It's fine. I'll bring enough energy for all of us.
Go on, Michael.
But today, on Tactics Tuesday, we're going to be discussing three topics. Firstly, what we saw against Arsenal. Most importantly, our left-hand side. We saw Willock and Joe Linton in there for the first time since, second time, should I say, the Fulham game, obviously, this season as well, but neither of them seemed fit. But before that, it's the first time since last season. And it actually looked incredibly good. Secondly, are we guilty of underestimating how solid our defence actually is? And finally, the importance of starting games strong, which we've only started doing over the last few games. But since we started doing it, we look class. But first of all, Hall, Willock, Joe Linton. All of them absolutely incredible at the weekend. Would we say that's our best three on the left, or is there maybe a Harvey Barnes or someone that you'd put in there instead? Nick, what do you think?
I think we touched on this when we recorded yesterday, Joe, just ever so slightly. We didn't cover it off fully, but I think the majority of us are feeling a certain way towards that left-hand side as what we've seen against the Chelsea game and obviously the Arsenal game. Personally, for me, that is currently, I think, our strongest starting left-hand side. And that is as blunt as I'm going to put it. However, Harvey Barnes seems to be having a bit of an sort of peak trough. And I can't remember the last time we've seen it. Well, he's been coming on as a substitute ever so recently, hasn't he? But I haven't been fully impressed with how he's come on. You know, normally you bring a sub on and you've got fresh legs, fresh perspective on the game. Whereas I kind of feel like he's maybe struggled ever so slightly to settle into the game. That's just my perspective on it. I just feel like that left-hand side in the last two games that we've seen has just been completely game-changing. And I feel like they click really well. They gel together really well. Teams can't handle it, and I don't know whether it's because we were sussed out on the left-hand side with Anthony Gordon there all the time and teams kind of figured out how to play us a little bit. Now we've sort of bung him over to the right and we've got Joey Linton on the left with Joe Willock and they can't cope. For me, it probably at the minute is our strongest left-hand side and I don't think it should change.
Would you agree with that, Joe?
I'd say pretty much, yeah. I mean, we've been crying out for change, haven't we? And this is, to me, the perfect change. They haven't played very often together. When they have played together, we're not going to talk about the Fulham game, by the way. I'm just talking on the odd time, but honestly, they are unreal together. And I think Eddie's came out and said how well they kind of work together. And again, going back to Willock being on the pitch, how well he works with Isak. We've seen that a number of times, not just this season, mainly last season, I would say. So that's the kind of combination I like to see coming from that side of things. And I think, again, it's something that we did touch on yesterday's pod, that because of then having that kind of force down the left, which we didn't have any kind of force down the right. But obviously, upon doing this on the left, we're moving Gordon over at the right, aren't we? Now, all of a sudden, having I was going to say a balance, but it is a balance, really, isn't it? Having these kind of strengths and options on both sides, it means that teams can't just simply defend against us on one side and kind of almost let us do what we want on the other, because we weren't a massive threat down the right. So obviously it was sussed out. We could see it as fans. Opposition people can see, whether it's the managers, the coaches, whatever. It was pretty damn obvious, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of nice to have now this power coming from both kind of sides. And I said it yesterday, I'll say it again. I want to see Gordon stay on the right until we've got other options. I'm not saying leave him out there permanently, but I'm saying until we've got another equally strong option, by the way. I'm not just talking about simply getting a right wing replacement and him not being as good as Gordon. I want someone as good as before we even consider shifting him back across. Because, like you said, Big Joe Willock on the left, which ironically, by the way, I was never actually a huge Big Joe fan on the left. I used to love him in the middle because I love him being able to power box-to-box midfielder in the middle. So I never really loved him as a winger, but this exact setup that we're talking about works perfectly for me. And we've said it again, and, you know, Ian kind of pointed out the other day, it was a bit of the golden formula, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that just sort of I wanted to mention was over previous Tactics Tuesdays, we've talked about potentially the Sean Longstaff effect. And that mainly last season was goals from midfield, getting forward in that third centre midfielder spot, mainly on the right side, and getting in there to sort of get the goals that Newcastle need. Now, the year before, that was Joe Willock. So it brings a case of, right, well, actually, maybe it's not Sean Longstaff that we're crying out for. I'm not saying Sean Longstaff should leave Newcastle. I'm not saying Sean Longstaff is a bad player. Longstaff, I love Longstaff at the minute because his attitude's fantastic and he comes in and does a job. But Joe Willock on that left-hand side, in that little hole, he was almost as close, he was pretty much next to Isak for a lot of the game. He was pressing that much forward, and then he had the energy to still get back and help out Lewis Hall and Joe Linton. But the point of that is, and what I do want to ask you both, is, funnily enough, since the beginning of 2022, Joe Linton and Joe Willock have started 38 Premier League games together.
Oh.
Across those 38 games, can you guess how many points Newcastle have picked up in those games?
Let me do some quick math.
38 games have started. I'm going to be dead positive. I'm going to go 60.
Oh, okay. Starting off with a 60. What are we thinking, Nick?
I am going to go... I'll go 70? Ish.
Oh, two good guesses, and it's a happy medium between the two. Well, almost. 66 points in 38 games where Joe Linton and Joe Willock started together. And obviously, we couldn't include Lewis Hall in that, but it'll probably be 75 in the next 38 if those three start together. But the point of that is they would have been enough for Newcastle to have finished 5th last season and 6th the season before. So, could that be the winning formula? Potentially. But it does also raise the question of Sandro Tonali. Does Sandro Tonali fit in that other side next to Bruno? Or could someone else fit there? Maybe a Sean Longstaff? What do we think?
I think it's a strange one because we've called out for Longstaff to come back, haven't we? But we all know that Longstaff isn't the answer as well. And we have to make this Tonali thing work.
Yeah.
I'm saying we have to make it work, but you know what I mean by that. Like, he is a great player, and I think he's got so much potential ahead of him. And we want to see Bruno and him working well together, to be fair. So, I think it's something that can work. I think it's just something that needs time. It's just one of those, like, how much time do you give something, if you know what I mean? So, I'm all for giving time, by the way, but you can't just let it run and run and run, and it never works.
100%.
I do believe, and I want to say positive, that it will kind of click at some point. I just hope it's sooner rather than later, I think, to kind of get rid of the frustration from everyone. I'm sure Eddie's probably equally as frustrated as everyone else. He'll want it to work, of course he does. They're his golden boys, aren't they? Yeah. But we've got to hope that Tonali's got to be the fit there eventually.
It's
Do you agree, Nick?
Yeah, I do agree. It is raising a question of why isn't it working? Because that is 3 players, and I'll include Joe Linton in that. That is 3 players that should be able to play together, and something just isn't working. And yeah, I do agree. The answer going forward is we can't just keep our captain on the bench so we can slot Tonali in the middle. But then my other argument is, like, on the Chelsea game in midweek last week, he played exceptionally well in that position.
Yeah.
So Ed, it's hard because he had a fantastic 90 minutes. Or how long he was on the pitch for. Did he get a full game in the end? I think he did, didn't he?
Yes,
I remember.
Chelsea,
he did.
Yeah, he did.
So it's one of these things that Eddie, you're probably right, is probably very frustrated about, and is wondering why it's not working. But it needs to click soon. Otherwise, there's going to be questions asked, and unfortunately, it's going to result in some of our better players being left out.
Yeah, 100%.
So, yeah.
I think it could be a classic sort of Gerrard and Lampard debate that you have for England.
Yeah.
Each to their own, best players in the world at the time, or at least close enough. Not saying Tonali's the best midfielder in the world before someone shoots me in the face. But what I will say is two fantastic players, but maybe it just doesn't click together. I'll tell you what
Oddly
will
enough,
click
Michael.
together.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I was just going to throw something in there. No, it was just funny that you said that because we actually haven't had that conversation, but it's the exact conversation I had with my dad after the last game. Bruno and Tonali played together. I used the whole Gerrard Lampard thing for England.
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah.
like, God, yeah. And we then had quite a lengthy conversation about it. It's just, I know we haven't on any of the pods or in the group or anything. So, no, it's just interesting that you brought that up because we haven't as a group yet. That's all. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
And
with
it'll
you.
be one for the next Tactics Tuesday.
Won't it just?
And speaking of things that click together, the global sports podcast networks, Daily Newcastle and Zencastr. So let's go to an advert.
Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner, with 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs. It's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
Well, it was beautifully delivered, but it didn't click at the start. It was like two puzzle pieces in the wrong place. And then we put them
Delayed.
together beautifully. It's all right. We'll edit that and post it. I'll just look like an idiot.
Fine.
Well, welcome back to the Daily Newcastle podcast. And obviously at the weekend, we've mentioned Lewis Hall already, but both of our fullbacks put in what I would regard is the greatest combination of performances from any Newcastle fullbacks I've seen in my life. Now, granted, I've only watched Newcastle in the 2000s, so unfortunately in the 90s, if you remember it, I don't. But actually, there was probably a game where Debussy and Santon clicked, and it looked magnificent. But
I used to love
can't
those
remember
two.
any of them. They were fantastic, weren't they? But
Nice little throwback.
yeah, Hall and Livramento could be better than them both. And
Yeah.
with that, I wanted to ask, do you think this season, because all of the focus has been on our attacking side, that the stability of our defence has actually gone a little understated? I mean, only Nottingham Forest and Liverpool have conceded less goals than Newcastle in the league this season. But what do you think, Joe?
Yeah, pretty much straight up, yes. Mainly because, well, like you say, everyone's talking about going forward, or more focusing on the problems on the right was a massive just gripe of apparently everyone. I mean, understandably so, but yeah, as such, it's almost like we haven't really discussed the defence. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it got to the point where even for the last game, when we did our predicted lineups, that it was even daft stuff like, even though realistically I knew Kraft and Kelly wouldn't stay in, I'd put down that I would keep them in. Now, realistically, I knew they were never in a million years going to be kept in for the Arsenal game, by the way. And actually, looking back, I wasn't thinking straight. I was just purely going off the back of the fact that they'd had a great Chelsea game, and I was, stars in my eyes almost just from the previous game. But it just shows that, like, Byrne, and I've said this before, by the way, I know he did a job at left back when he's not a natural left back, but for what he's done at centre back and for what we bought him in for, and when we did buy him in, everyone was talking like, oh, we can do better than that. We've got loads of money, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
But man, that come on, he's done a job, hasn't he? And he's a great centre back. So value for money wise, I absolutely love Byrne as well. Cher, I mean, we don't need to talk about Cher and how much we love Cher because everybody loves Cher, and if they don't, you're wrong. So
It's here first.
exactly. But Tino is just, we have talked, he has got weaknesses, of course he has, but he's still young.
Yeah.
They'll get ironed out. He is growing and growing and growing, but that last game, man, I'm not going to lie, I didn't see that kind of performance from the pair of them, the strength from a 21-year-old and a 20-year-old. They absolutely controlled Arsenal's wingers. We discussed this yesterday, 100%. And it was fantastic to see. And you can just hope that the two of them will stay with us for a long time and continue to get better and better.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. I remember being asked about the Arsenal game whenever we all last podded last week, and two of my biggest worries was because I knew Tino and Lewis obviously would be on our fullback.
Yeah.
And my biggest worry was Tino and his weaknesses. I'm not shy in saying that. We all know he's got a weakness. And
100%.
obviously Lewis Hall struggling. And I'm not saying Lewis Hall's had bad games. I don't think really Lewis Hall's had a bad game this season. I'm just going to put that out there. I think he's looking exceptionally well in a Newcastle shirt. However, for them two young lads to keep Bukayo Saka, hush, and what's the other winger? Martinelli? Yeah, Martinelli, hush, is something to be very proud of, and I think has gone completely kind of unnoticed because of how well our left-hand side worked. So obviously, like you say, we've been focusing on going forward, but I think them two performances have completely gone unnoticed. Because I had to listen into the game, I couldn't watch it, but I didn't hear a peep out of Bukayo Saka all game, other than maybe one opportunity. And coming off the back of a game at the weekend where they played Liverpool, he was all over the place. So I was worried about that. But no, Lewis Hall and Tino are both two very, very exciting, I'm going to call them an English project, because I think they will be the first choice eventually for England. And I think they have to be, really. Yeah, I think they're great.
Hall's got to be the solution to our left-back problems for England. I mean, we're not going to go too much into that because we're not talking about England, but surely he's going to be stepping into the fold very quickly.
Yeah.
Not too much, Michael, not yet. We've got an international break to discuss that one.
Oh, it's fine. People fall asleep during the international break. They need podcasts. No, just on the topic there, obviously we've mentioned it. We'll go into more detail probably next week. But do you think Lewis Hall and Livramento have a real shout of getting called up this time?
Can't see why not. I mean, Tino's already been called up, hasn't he? So
yep.
I don't think he's made his first minutes though. Has he got his first cap?
I just meant called up as in called up.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Because Hall's obviously still for the under-21s, isn't he? Sorry. Yeah. I'm so used to you knowing everything, Michael. I'm not going to lie. Like you are Mr. Statman. You just you're supposed to deliver the facts to us and just tee us up and set us off.
What can I say? I'm unprepared.
Oh no, it's all going to go wrong.
Or nothing.
Oh, this is fair enough. You know we don't love them as much, but we've got to expect to see them both in the fold. It'd be great to as well, Lorna. How proud are we going to be when at some point England's fullbacks are our two boys? Oh, that'll be amazing, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you agree, Nick?
Yeah, completely. I think we have to. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to go into England. Does Thomas Tuchel take over in January? Fully, it's January, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, we've got Lee Carsley again for the last international break, but I think we can fully expect ourselves to see a completely, not fully, but refreshed England side. And that will include the likes of Tino and likely Lewis Hall going into that squad. And like you say, Tino has already been called up, just hasn't played his minutes yet. I think he deserves it, particularly from his last couple of performances. And like I said, Lewis Hall, I don't think's had a bad game this season, which is baffling because last season we were all a little bit worried about why we brought him.
Yeah.
And we're a bit like, we don't understand because he wasn't playing that great. And now we can understand the Eddie Howe logic of it's just a project. And look at how well he's playing. The boy looks so confident. Like, it looks like a completely different player.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely fantastic. And hopefully we see more Newcastle players in England colours going forward, but not enough that they end up like Michael Owen. But on that semi-sour note, we're going to move on to our second advert of the afternoon. Well, now.
No? Okay. This podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. Global Sports Podcast Network, every club, every day.
Absolutely delivered, especially because I forgot what I was going to say and put you on the spot. I was like, what are you going to say?
Just now. Now will do great.
I do apologise for that.
That's right, mate.
It's been a long day of work. We can all appreciate that.
I'm just glad that both went kind of awry because it doesn't make me feel too bad, even though I know it was me being on super delay before.
We started strong. We got people engaged. That's what matters.
This is what happens.
Talking about starting strong, that leads us into our next topic. So, Arsenal, the Arsenal game, so Alexander Isak's goal, in the early stages of the game, believe around the 12th minute, and that was the earliest goal that Newcastle have scored in the league this season. And actually was our only goal scored before the 30th minute. So I have to ask, what was different about the Chelsea game and the Arsenal game that actually allowed us to score early on? Any takers?
Are we talking Chelsea League or Chelsea Cup, obviously, because two very
Chelsea
different
Cup,
things.
Chelsea League, we can... I didn't like that start
Forget
at
about
all.
it. Didn't happen, did it? Right, exactly. It's a funny one, to be fair. I didn't know it was our earliest one, but at the same time, it makes absolute sense. I've been to every home game and it doesn't feel like we scored that early. And obviously we've watched all the away games pretty much as well. So yeah, that stat doesn't surprise me. However, what I have to say about Saturday, which I was surprised at, by the way, especially because it was the early kickoff, the atmosphere was by far the best I've experienced all season in there. So it was almost like it was a nighttime game and everyone would be on the drink and everyone was just buzzing and everyone's up for it. I appreciate the stack opens at 10, so come on, people. We've got a good 2.5 hours there. But
Not
no, it
sponsored
was.
by
I mean,
the Stack.
not sponsored by alcohol or anything like that. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like, I can't speak for like the whole stadium. I appreciate that. But up where I was in the Elisa's West Corner in level 7 near the away fans, which they were great at first. They were very, very quiet in the second half. So there was a bit of no noise from the Cockney boys, which I do like. And we sang pretty much throughout, which I love, because I love to just sing, much to the annoyance of some people around me sometimes, God forbid. But what was great was you could hear the Gallagher singing, you could hear the stadium, so there must have been enough noise that it wasn't just a couple of kind of corners, which does sometimes happen. And you could see it on the pitch, and it was almost like the fans were bouncing off them, they're bouncing off us, and it made a difference. And maybe that was what drove I mean, you never know. The players come out and say that it does, so I like to believe that it actually does make a massive difference to them. But the atmosphere, I think, might have helped play a big, big factor in it, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think when you see the way Bruno and Joe Linton rile up the crowd, I think that tells you it makes a big difference. I'll say being sat in the Leazes yesterday, just under the Arsenal fans, it was good to hear more Newcastle than Arsenal, because usually if I sit there, all I can hear is the away fans, but I absolutely agree. It was fantastic. Yeah. I did have to explain to my wife what the Thomas Partey chant was about, which was an awkward conversation. But it was one of the many, many chants of the day. All you could hear was the Newcastle fans, and, well, all you could see was the Newcastle boys.
But more importantly, Michael, did she join in? Did she sing?
Oh, she was louder than me.
You could hear her.
Well done.
Yes. On to, before I got a little bit derailed, but on the topic of us starting strong this season, only Manchester United have actually scored less goals in the opening of games than Newcastle this season, but our last 4 goals have been 4 of our 5 quickest in competitions this season. So what that says to me is that Eddie Howe has looked at things, and bear in mind, before the Chelsea game, we did hear that things were going to be a little bit different. We were going to have tweaks. Mm-hmm. It's quite clear that Eddie Howe's looked at things and changed them, which, by the way, is what he gets told he never does every single week. So it's one of those. On Tactics Tuesday, I just thought I'd raise it and I'd mention it, just because it's absolutely fantastic. But when we look at our most sort of strongest performances, Man City, Tottenham, Arsenal, Chelsea, all big clubs. I'm not saying Nottingham Forest aren't a big club, but are we going to be able... Well, Tottenham, not a big club, yes, I know. I saw the faces. But are we going to be able to repeat the same performances against Nottingham Forest and West Ham? And how do we replicate that? Particularly when we're away against Nottingham Forest. Do we keep the same lineup, or do we sort of tweak it?
Go on, Nick.
Nottingham Forest are on a little bit of a roll, aren't they? And I'm not going to lie, Chris Wood, what has happened to him? I'm worried, guys. I'm worried that he's going to do what he done last season. Yeah. But there's absolutely no doubt that Newcastle can do what they've done against Arsenal. We had a good performance against Man City. they can go and do it against these clubs. What Newcastle need to keep is the confidence and belief, because what we sometimes see, and you guys just touched on it about fan atmosphere, and we heard Eddie Howe midweek on about, or the weekend before, sorry, about, you know, he would respect when he makes decisions not to be booed and players be booed on and off the pitch, and, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
It's obviously going to affect players. And, you know, you have to take a step back and think, we've actually got some young players in our team. You know, we've got Tino, we've got Lewis Hall, you know, young boys. That's going to not only affect them, well, they're going to affect them mentally. So I 110% agree with what Eddie was saying there. But we need to go into these games exactly the same way we've gone into the Arsenal and Chelsea game, with just confidence, high pressing, start the game like we did the rest, and just keep it going. Don't sit back. I mean, I've touched on this, I think, at the beginning of the season. You know, there was a couple of games last season, you know, where we would go sort of 1-0 up and then we would sit back for the rest of the game. Not every time, but there was a few where that was happening, and it was incredibly frustrating. And then in result, we'd either draw or lose, and, you know, no one wants that. So in regards to starting lineup, though, it's really difficult, because I do feel Tonali deserves a start, particularly from his midweek Chelsea performance, but it's who you drop in return for that, because like you say, Bruno wears his heart on his sleeve with the club. He absolutely idolises the club, and that is someone that you need on the pitch. I don't care what anyone says. But then he gets stick, but Sean Longstaff comes in and he does a job and performs exceptionally well. You can't take that away from him. He runs like a horse. Like, I think I read a stat the other day, like he covered 10 kilometers on the pitch on Saturday, and that is just mad. So in regards to starting lineup, the only change I would potentially make is bringing Tonali in, but I could not tell you the answer of who you would drop, and that is not a headache I want. So over to Eddie Howe for that one.
What about you, Jo? Do you think it should stay unchanged, or maybe a change?
No, I wouldn't make any changes. Mainly because I think it's harsh to drop anyone. I don't think he's going to drop Bruno, is more the point. No. I actually don't even think it's a discussion. No. I know where you're going with it, by the way, but yeah, it is so not getting dropped.
Absolutely not. I agree, by the way.
Wrong based. Oh God, yeah, I'm sure you. No. I know it's a funny one, isn't it? Because I think we've talked about Bruno and the whole Tonali thing before, but yeah, Bruno's not getting dropped, is he? No. And this whole Joe Linton and Willock thing that we've just talked about, so neither of them can move. And if I'm honest, I don't really want to see Longstaff dropped either.
No.
Yeah.
Maybe take it to the 60-minute mark, see if anything needs to change, and Tonali can come on for a good half an hour. You know, I'm not saying give him 5 minutes at the end and completely waste his talents, but at the same time, I think we need to approach this game how we've approached the big games. We need to give Forest the respect that we are giving the other teams by turning up, playing hard. And I mean, like you've just said, they're on a roll. Forest are third in the league, man. These guys are not being pushovers at the minute at all. Never mind just Chris Wood, just the whole team are playing well. So no, I want to see us turn up. I want us to go hard at them straight away. And I want us to try and get another early-ish goal, because it will made a massive difference for Arsenal. Because I think if we hadn't got an early one, by the way, or if they had snatched one first, I think there could have been a massively different outcome on that game.
Yeah.
So we need 100%. To approach this exactly the same with the same lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like you say, over to you, Eddie, but that's just my opinion,
yeah. It's hard. It is
and
hard.
With that, and with that, I will end on the stat that we saw I saw in the highlights of the game, should I say, that we haven't actually dropped points from a winning position so far this season. In fact, the only team to get a result against us from when we've been leading the season was Nottingham Forest in the Cup, and we ended up beating them on penalties. So, over to Forest, over to Newcastle, and over to the rest of the team for the rest of the week. Well, actually, including myself, because I'm on tomorrow. But I won't be talking about Forest because it's Wild Card Wednesday.
Ooh, so see you tomorrow, Michael.
See you tomorrow. And we'll also see all of you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.